Hi guys, it's Miss Savela. I'm here to show you guys how to do your persuasive speech, and I could very easily do it at school, but I want you to see how I'm doing mine at home. So I'm using a computer screen. I do have a big screen, I'm lucky, but you can also plug it into your HDMI cable on the back of your TV. You can use your Chromebook, you can use whatever you want. Okay, so I can't get my computer screen and myself into the same picture, so that's why I'm seated. But when you do your speeches, you need to make sure that you're standing, otherwise you'll lose points. Okay? All right, so I've done this 3 times now, and I've gone over time, so I'm going to do my best to not go over time. Okay? So here we go. I have OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. This means I generally feel anxious about things that are out of my control. And often when people find out I have OCD, they react in this way. When they see somebody who has diabetes, or somebody who has a broken leg, or someone who's sick, they tell them to go to the doctor. But with somebody like me, who has an anxiety disorder or depression, they say, well, just think happy thoughts. It doesn't quite work that way. I can't think, don't have a broken leg, and my broken leg go away. It's not that simple. So having OCD has some criteria. You don't get to just diagnose yourself as having OCD. And you also don't get to just say, oh, I'm having an OCD moment, because it's not like, oh, I just broke my leg moment. You can't just break your leg for a little part of time, and you can't have a broken leg for a day. It doesn't work like that. So here are some things about OCD, let me tell you, that you'll get 2 or more hours a day that interrupt your normal functioning. So anything you have to do during your day gets interrupted for more than 2 hours. So that means a normal day that you're working, it would be 10 hours, maybe 12, 14, depending on what you work at. 2 of those hours are disrupted by some of these things. The ruminating thoughts are irrational, repetitive to a point of disruption, focusing on a person to do something to distract these thoughts. Generally speaking, worrying about things that are irrational, that can't happen. So I don't worry about those things. I do these other things, which can fall into 5 categories. Repetitive behaviors, mental acts, checking, ordering, rituals, avoiding, and they are all very time consuming. Like I said, 2 hours more a day. So for me, doing these things is not necessarily just that. Having the idea of having to clean things and organize things, that's not the OCD. The OCD is the worrying about something else that you're unaware of, that I am trying to calm myself down by doing these other things. So when I do those other things, it actually means that something is bothering me and I can't stop thinking about it. And that's what the rumination is. That's kind of like when a song gets stuck in your head, except over and over and over again, and no matter what, you can't get rid of it. Or trying to turn a light switch off, that doesn't work. Such repetitions are to reduce the person's anxiety of a perceived illogical, dreaded event or outcome that is not related to the behavior. So whatever I'm worried about has nothing to do with what I'm actually doing. So in the mornings, I check my flat iron to make sure that it's unplugged. I run my thumb over it 4 times to make sure that it's unplugged. I know, go ahead, laugh. That's fine. I do everything in sequence of 4, and usually I have to do things 4 times in order to be sure. Now, sometimes I'm better than others. My OCD does kick in when my anxiety is higher, and there are certain situations that will trigger my anxiety, that's for sure. So when people say, oh, just think happy thoughts, it doesn't work that way. I'm not going to just think happy thoughts and my broken leg is going to go away. But my cat right here, he might join us. This was according to the DSM-IV criteria. So when I hear someone say I'm so OCD, I'm not offended because I really know what they mean, but there is a little part of me that kind of goes, and that's because it minimizes my own struggle with my disorder. It makes it feel like what I feel is something that can just go away. It's something that I could just think happy thoughts, or it makes it seem like it's something that just happens every now and then. But it's something I deal with every single day. And it's something that I have to struggle with every single day. And the anxiety isn't all it is. It's OCD, anxiety that are combating my depression. And when we talk about being depressed, we're not talking about being a little sad. We're talking about depression that is aching and powerful and has a lot of really harmful effects on your body. So these are the things that upset me when people talk about being OCD. Now, what does this have to do with anything? Well, I'll tell you. Political correctness gone too far, right? Okay, so we're talking about language. How many of you have ever said any of these things? Right? Right? Me too. And people will say, well, that's not offensive. I've heard other people say that. You've said that, Savela. I've heard teachers say that. What's wrong with these words? Nothing in context. So for instance, if we have a friend or a sister who's deaf and we say that she's deaf, she can't hear you, then that's okay because she literally is deaf. But if we're talking to someone and we're upset with them and they're not paying attention and we're like, what are you, deaf? What we're now doing is we're saying that to be deaf means not paying attention. And to people who are hard of hearing, that's kind of offensive. It implies that they're not able to hear. They don't care and they're not paying attention. And those are not the same thing. So what is this called? This is called ableism, ableist language. And what ableist language is defined by Norwick as ableist language is language that is offensive to people with a disability. A disability is something that a person cannot control. About 1 billion people worldwide, that's 15% of the global population, or 25% in the US, have some sort of disability. And we use those language all the time in order to describe things that we mean something else, according to Rashitka Arni Ravishnakara. Many of the derogatory terms that we use have come from medical language, and some of those are the word moron, idiot, and the R word that I refuse to use. And those were a way for the medical community to say these are people that are other. They're people that are not acceptable in society. And that comes from the study of eugenics, where they wanted to create a perfect human race. So anybody who didn't have the perfect genes was diagnosed with something that made them sound less pleasurable or less desirable. So words that come with disabilities fall under that, according to EXOC. So the effect of this is basically that we know not to use these words. There's certain words that we know are off limits, the R word, right? Okay, but there are other words like crazy, dumb, OCD, bipolar, lame, deaf, blind, and they seem fairly innocuous, and they are. But the thing is, we have a great vocabulary. So let's say what we mean. When we mean crazy, we don't mean crazy, we mean unbelievable. So let's say unbelievable. When we say unaware, not blind. I know it's a lot harder than it seems, and do I expect you to change your language? Absolutely not. But that language does affect people, and if you're aware of it, that's half the battle. Ableism is larger than language, and here's what it does according to Novick. It reveals how our own disregard for disabilities and disorders. It shows other people that we don't really value that. It also allows for others to think it's okay to say those words. And finally, it tells us that these kind of disabilities don't have the same place in the world as people with them. Using these words, we silently imply and others infer that mental and physical disorders are avoidable, they're personal failings, and not medical conditions of a person's control, said by Davis. In other words, when someone tells you to calm down when you're angry, has that ever helped you? Probably not. It's probably made you angrier. So to tell me to just feel better, not going to help me feel better. So what's the solution? Well, a lot of people say things like, if you need a thicker skin, you're too sensitive. That's 33% of a survey that I created in class said that. Well, that might be true. But are you being insensitive? Because if I'm being too sensitive, maybe you're being insensitive. Instead of blaming the other person, shouldn't reflect on your own biases. Ableist language encourages a culture of separation. It defines, excludes, and marginalizes people, according to Norwick. It's also not, but everyone says it, it's no big deal. 38% they say that. Well, the thing is it isn't a big deal. Honestly, it's a lazy person's way of saying, I don't want to change. That's okay. It is. It's hard to change, but that doesn't mean it's not a big deal. Rachel Rottenberg says, these words seem so natural to people that they go uncritiqued a great deal of the time. Problem with going uncritiqued and saying it's no big deal is words that are a lot more hurtful and slurs continue to be until someone says something about it. It's also not, people know I'm kidding, you know what I mean, I don't mean it that way, 45% said this. That might be true. However, 64% said that by saying the words, it makes others think that using the words is okay. Ableist language, according to Sarah Novick, says that a colloquialism function, like any other slang term, people repeat it because they've heard it, others say it. It goes back to what we talked about at the beginning of the year, that when we use words, we imply that those words are okay to be used. I have a friend who's blank, and he doesn't care. 52% of you said that you've used this or you've heard this. Don't allow one person to speak for a whole group, because just because one person's okay with it doesn't mean the whole group is. Ableist language encourages a culture of separation. It defines, excludes, and marginalizes people. So, of course, we don't need political correctness, we don't need thicker skins, we don't need word police, people saying get over it, we don't need to cancel people, we don't need another thing to check to include inclusivity, a protest, a rally, a government bill regulating language, a hashtag, a movement, or and reinvent our language. We don't need that. What we do need is we need to be aware of what we're saying and use the words that we need and use the words that we mean instead of using words that are easy. We have a vocabulary, so let's use it. But what does that have to do with me? Well, I'll tell you what it has to do with you. First, think about what you mean. Don't just repeat a phrase because you've heard it. Think about what you're trying to convey. 2, be understanding and listen to others' concerns of your use of words. You don't have to agree with them, but you do need to be polite. And be aware that just because it doesn't affect you, that it doesn't matter. How do I know if I'm being an ableist? Are you trying to make someone feel less invisible or less than invisible or inferior? Or are you saying what you mean, or can you choose better words? Words are free. It's how you use them that may cost you. Today we looked at a couple of things. We looked at ableist language, how it affects us, how it affects me, and what we can do about it. Maybe next time you'll choose your words more wisely. And as Friedrich Nietzsche once said, you better love the taste of your words because you may just eat them.